Hey, Two Cities family, Pastor Stephen here. Welcome to our very first SOS. These are casual conversations we'll have around tough topics that concern all things relationships. Especially as we go through our Song of Solomon series, we want to have space to talk about some of the questions that you very well are asking. And we want to hear from some of our TCC family. So today I have some of our staff with us, Spencer and Olivia Martin, and also Miss Carrie Wilson, formerly Strickland. Congratulations. And here we are talking today about singleness, dating, and boundaries. So we'll jump right in. Spencer, coming to you. In your opinion, how are Christians a little goofy when it comes to dating?
You know, there are quite a few ways that Christians are goofy in dating. I'll just name one. I think that Christians can be prone to have over-spiritual expectations of the dating relationship, or unrealistic expectations as to what they are looking for in a potential spouse. And so, for example, let's say a young man loves the book Radical by David Platt. And this young man might think, well, if this woman doesn't or has not read this book Radical by David Platt, she must not have a heart for the nations. Therefore, I'm not interested in her. And so I think that Christians can tend to over-spiritualize things to the point where it's just not fair to the other person.
I've never heard of Christians over-spiritualizing anything. It's breaking news, right? Ladies, anything to add how we can be a little goofy when it comes to dating?
Yeah, I think a lot of times in Christian community, we feel like asking somebody on a date is asking them to marry you. And that in doing that, we put all this pressure on each person involved. We don't want to ask the guy we think is cute to maybe grab coffee, and that's actually okay to do that, ladies. You can ask another person to grab coffee. We don't want to initiate that dating relationship, or not even a relationship, just that date, because we're afraid of what comes next. Like, oh, does this mean I have to want to marry this person? Does this mean that I'm now going to have to be in a relationship with this person? The pressure is really too much, when really a date is just an opportunity to get to know another person. It's like meeting any friend for the first time. You're getting to know what you have in common, but you're also learning things about yourself. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I see is people pretending like if I ask someone on a date, it means I have to marry them. And because of that, a lot of Christians don't end up going on dates for a really long time.
Very helpful. Anything to add? Anything to share?
I just want to reiterate what Carrie was saying. Just the importance of not thinking that you're going to marry them if you go on a date with them, or even if you can see yourself marrying them. Like, the point of getting to know this person is, can I see myself dating them? You don't have to know that off the bat. Does there need to be general attraction and like some commonality, something kind of drawing you towards that person? I think that probably needs to be there in order to say yes to a date. But other than that, it's really like, yeah, pressure is off. Just get to know this person.
Yeah, and for the Christian friends out there, take the pressure off. Stop asking your friends who went on the first date whether they're going to marry them. Right? I feel like your grandma and your friends or whatever else raise those pressure, those stakes too. But how about this? For the approximately half of us, right, that are single, how would you all encourage singles to leverage their singleness for the glory of God? How would you encourage the singles to leverage that unique season of life of singleness for God's glory?
I think there's a unique opportunity that single people have to pour into other people. Once you're married, your family takes up a lot of your time. Your spouse or your kids, if you have those, take up a lot of your time, and there's a lot less margin in your life in that point. And I think one of the things that was beneficial to me in my singleness was being able to pour into other people, to younger women, to allow other people to pour into me in that process as well, but to use that time to glorify God. One person I've heard call it to cultivate holy ambition. Not only am I pouring into other people, but I'm cultivating myself into the person that I know that God wants me to be, and the person that would be a good spouse to a future husband, who would be a good girlfriend to a future boyfriend. And so that would be what I would say is just like using that time to glorify God and build yourself into that person that He's calling you to be.
Really helpful. Anything?
I would say that we have to understand that marriage is a gift, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that singleness very much so is a gift. Singleness, very similar to what Carrie said, enables you to be flexible. Singleness allows you to have the capacity to make disciples that it might be challenging to do so when you're married. And so the example that I often use is when I was in college and shortly after college, I had the capacity to go on multiple mission trips. I probably went on 2 mission trips per year in college. And that was just a perk of being single during that season. Whereas now that I'm married and have a newborn, I'm not able to just take off and leave whenever I want to. And
You don't let him take off and leave whenever he wants?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, not able to. Olivia, would you have anything to add?
I also think building and establishing those like healthy habits in singleness. So, just regularly being in the Word and prayer, just those spiritual disciplines that we've learned about in December. I think it's super important to regularly implement those before you have a family. As someone who has a newborn, fighting for that time is just so much harder. But I'm just so thankful that individually we both established those like healthy rhythms in our singleness that served us well in marriage so far and as new parents.
And I think, too, for singleness, I'll just answer my own question. I think, too, for singleness, having your goal, your aim as your single being God's goal and God's aim. Because the reason you are created, it was not just to find a spouse. You were created to be transformed in the image of Christ. And so this is time for unique ministry, unique flexibility and capacity ministry, time for unique focus on your own personal spiritual disciplines. This is an opportunity for you to be transformed in the image of Christ, which, as Carrie reminded, is going to set anyone up for success in any relationship. But talking about desire, talking about goal in that way, what's your advice for those who are trying to balance being content in the Lord, but also a strong desire to be married?
I would say, that is a good desire. Marriage is a good desire. God created marriage. God said it's not good for man to be alone. And now we know that we can live that out lots of ways through Christian community as well. But marriage in itself is good. It's a part of God's design. And so I think a lot of times we can beat ourselves up if we want to be married, but that's not a bad thing. It's when that want and that desire becomes something that we believe God's promised to us. I think it's important to remember that God promises us a lot of good things that he will give us. And we can cling to those promises, but when we turn something like a desire to be married into a promise that God has given us, that's when it becomes unhealthy. That's when the discontentment can start, and it can really hurt our relationship with God in the process. But I would just say, it's not bad to want a good thing. And if you are desiring that, what are you doing to put yourself in a position, A, to be ready for it, and 2, so that it could actually happen?
That's going to be our next question. But we'll get there. Do y'all have anything to add about that balancing desire between being content in the Lord and also wanting to be married?
I think the idea of, as you're praying about it, I think it is totally okay to be, praying like, Lord, I desire this. Like, will it be in your will for this to be a gift that you give to me? But I think having open hands, and that was something that literally when I desired to be married. That was something I deeply wanted. And when I would pray about it had to be something that I physically would have my hands open as I was praying about it, because otherwise I could just feel myself clinging to it and not being willing to, break up with a guy if I was dating him because he wasn't right, because I was clinging to it. So just being willing to surrender that. So not even just in singleness, but as well in dating, like just constantly having like hands open. So I think just that tension of, praying to the Lord about those desires, but trying to keep your hands open.
And so for those who would like to be dating and eventually married, what are some practical advice you'd give to those single people? They're single now. They want to be in a relationship, maybe one day married. What can you tell them that should be their next step or something to focus on or to practically walk forward in?
I would just encourage single people to be committed to being engaged in community, whether that be community group, DNA group, regularly attending church, regularly serving at church, putting yourself in environments that will allow you to meet others. Because if all you do is watch church online and you just hang out with the same 2 or 3 people all the time, then it's going to be very challenging for you to meet anyone new. Whereas if you want to meet someone new, I would encourage you to be in community as much as you can, and then hopefully, Lord willing, you will come across someone who is also single, and you might be able to go on a date with them. So,
I would just go off of that point to say I've heard it said before that if it's nice to to really believe that God will provide a spouse for you. And I believe that most of us will be married and that God gives good gifts to us. But at the same time, if you think he's going to drop someone on your doorstep, well, it better be the mailman, right? Because otherwise, that's not how you're going to meet your future spouse. I think a lot of the times the problem is, like you said, we don't put ourselves in positions to where we're even available to date. What does that mean for the ladies? Ladies, it's okay to go up and have a conversation with a guy. It crippled me for so many years, and I was single for many years, I think, because I was so afraid to go up to a guy and initiate that conversation. I felt like that meant I was pursuing that guy, that it was wrong, that the guy shouldn't know that I was interested. And it was really wrong thinking that made me miss out on a lot of opportunities. I think shifting that and beginning to say, okay, I can go up and talk to this guy that I think is interesting and that I really think loves the Lord, and I can have a conversation with him and show interest. That was a big game changer for me and led to a lot of positive dating experiences.
I think another thing that people probably think about is, is online dating okay? Is that a way that I can meet someone? And, in our opinion, we say, like, yes, that's okay. Now, what's the heart motivation behind that? And that's with everything. Is it that, I'm not trusting the Lord and I'm going to, put it into my own hands and just find someone to go on dates with? Like, okay, we would caution towards that. But is there anything wrong with being on an online dating profile? Like, probably not. So I think that's something to also have community to speak into about, wise ways to do that. Are there certain platforms that are maybe more likely to lead to godly dating than others? Probably. But I think including community in that is really important. But I definitely think that's an option.
Just to add on to something that Carrie said, I think that in general, a good rule of thumb is that when it comes to men and women and their responsibilities in the dating scene, I think men are to initiate and women are to respond. That is a general truth. At the same time, like Carrie said, it is okay to be a young woman and go talk to a young man. It's totally fine. Please do that. And then to young men, I've spoken with multiple college young men who feel very uncomfortable talking to girls. And so my encouragement is, hey, even if it's not a girl that you're interested in, have conversations with females. Because if all you do is talk to your guy roommates while you play video games in your dorm, then you're not going to learn how to talk to young women. And so just getting experience in conversations can be very helpful and can make you a lot more comfortable to go deeper with people as you get to know them.
Really helpful. And just maybe specifically for guys, and the ladies may have some thoughts for girls, but if you would like to be in a dating relationship, I would just challenge the guys to focus on what you can control. By that I mean really yourself. And be the type of person that is dateable, that's responsible, that, if you're in school, that's doing well in school, that is disciplined in going to bed on time, waking up at the right time, that's like well kempt, like wear clean clothes, get a haircut, wear a shirt with buttons on it, tie your shoes, all that type of stuff. Just be a presentable, responsible, disciplined, self-controlled, all these type of things that really ladies are interested in. You could do that by yourself. And I think that'll very much help kind of pave the way forward. Any maybe specific advice for young ladies?
I think be confident in who you are. I think if you are confident in who you are as a woman and who God's created you to be, people notice that. People notice that you're comfortable in your own skin. And I think the more we can be confident in who that person is and even cultivate that, like we talked about before, the more attractive we're going to appear to the guys out there. You're someone who knows what she wants, who is seeking after the Lord. That's attractive, and so show that confidence. I think that goes a long way.
And so how about this? If you have a younger guy, younger girl, or other single that's maybe interested, somebody's caught their eye, their attention, or maybe a lady that they think maybe someone's interested, what are some practical pieces of advice you'd give for that like talking phase where you have somebody, you're interested? What are some practical pieces you would give maybe for a guy or a girl in like the talking phase of a dating relationship, just starting out?
I'd say even going into it, don't wait too long to ask the person on the date. I think our tendency can be, especially for a lot of guys I know, I'm going to watch this girl that I think is cute and loves the Lord from afar. And if she is exactly what I want her to be, like you kind of mentioned before, then maybe I'll ask her out. Well, the problem in that situation is this guy or girl has set this unrealistic expectation of who this other person is. And they get on that date and like, wow, this is like not what I thought it was going to be. So I think if you're interested, take a moment. You know, you don't have to ask every person out that you think's cute, but take a moment. And if you really feel like this is someone you would have a good conversation with, a good time with, what's there to lose? Ask that person on a date. It doesn't have to lead to another.
Mr. Martin?
You know, I often tell college students and not college students that dating is designed to lead to marriage. And so in view of that, you should date with intention. And so in your first date, in your second date, in your third date, of course, you can have small talk. You can talk about what sports you played in high school. You can talk about, your favorite TV shows. But at the same time, your dates should be intentional in some way. You shouldn't be surface level in all of your conversations all the time. Because you want to know about this person's family. You want to know about this person's vision for the future. You want to know what they are looking for in a marriage. And if all you have is surface level conversations, then you're not going to find out that important information that will allow you to decide whether or not you want to continue to take steps forward towards marriage.
I think also just some practically talking about, if you see someone at church, let's say, and you just want to talk to them, like, what's something you can ask this person other than, like, how are you? One question that Spencer and I like to ask people just in general is, like, what's something you're looking forward to? First, that allows them to talk about themselves some, which we all enjoy being asked about something we're excited about because they're excited. So it's just like, it's something that they can talk about, and it just gives you an opportunity to listen and then respond to that person. So I think that's like a non-threatening question that a guy or a gal can say to someone else, and it's not like an awkward, you don't have to overthink it. So that's a good question just to use in lots of situations, but I think that is just a easy, okay, I want to have my first conversation with this cute girl. Here's a good question.
And if you're following the theme here, a lot of this theme is surrounded around conversation. Like it's very easy. You may feel comfortable sending like a DM or even like getting her number from one of her friends and texting her and who is this again? Oh yeah, I saw you across the room. That's fine if you start, I guess, with those kind of in-person communication. But I think a great challenge for anyone, if you're interested, physically walk across the room and open up your mouth and have like a actual face-to-face conversation. I think it's a great place to start.
And if that's not possible, that old-fashioned thing called a telephone, like actually calling someone. I've had guys do that in the past, and that made a big difference. Wow, like they took a second to have an actual phone call. That took a lot of guts, and it was a lot of intentionality. So if you can't be face-to-face for some reason, the phone call can go a long way too.
And as Spencer mentioned earlier, I mean, if you're in a dating relationship, he wants to encourage, and I think rightly so, to do it with intention, talk about things that are maybe underneath the surface. But what are some helpful boundaries to put then? If we're trying to pursue, maybe date with a purpose, if we're trying to walk forward with intention, but then what should be some of the guardrails we place, some of the boundaries we make so it's not too intimate too quickly? What are some guardrails and some safety places for a dating relationship?
I tend to think of boundaries in the dating scene in two main categories. I think of emotional boundaries and I think of physical boundaries. And so emotional boundaries, for example, you do not need to be sharing your absolute deepest feelings, emotions, things in your past with the person that you're dating on the first, second, third date. Certainly there's wisdom with when to share certain things. But, Olivia will speak a little bit about just wisdom when it comes to saying I love you to the other person. Go ahead, Olivia. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is something that, I feel like we see often, first in college ministry and, when we were younger, that, it can be easy to feed into these early feelings of being infatuated with the other person. You're maybe you're exclusively dating. This is exciting. The intent is marriage. So now you're just like, okay, as a woman too, I think we would love to hear early on if a guy loves us. That just speaks to us. Our desire is to be loved. I mean, we know that as we're created by God. But so we like to caution people just towards, wait as long as you can to tell the other person that you love them, or at least until you can act on it. So when marriage is within, a reasonable amount of time. So, and everyone is different. So there's not an actual time frame. Like I know very godly people who said that they loved each other and got married within 3 months of dating and have a beautiful marriage. So I don't think we want to put restrictions. We don't want to give people rules, but just wisdom on, if you're 18 and go on your second date with this person, do you need to tell them you love them, 3 weeks later, when realistically marrying that person is possibly years down the road?
And I would also add that part of emotional boundaries could be seen as spiritual boundaries. And so what I mean by that is, after a sermon, can you speak with your girlfriend or boyfriend about the sermon? Sure. Can you talk about the Bible together? Sure. But should you maybe try to avoid having a 30-minute Bible study every night while you're reading through the book of James and you're confessing your sin to each other and you're just getting into real deep personal things as you read through the scriptures together and you're praying together every night? I think there's some wisdom in trying to avoid lots and lots of spiritual intimacy while you are also, of course, trying to maintain physical boundaries and trying to be self-control in that area as well.
Yeah, I think you need that accountability outside of that relationship. And even once you're married, you're going to have accountability outside of your relationship. So cultivating friendships with people of the same sex now, like a DNA group, where you can have those types of conversations, I think is really good and honestly really good practice for the future. But when you make that person you're dating that accountability partner, so to speak, and you're laying all of it out on the table, there's a weird kind of connection that happens, almost a soul tie, some would call it, when we begin to have those types of conversations, that creates this idea that we're more connected and committed than we actually are, and can make it really painful when things don't work out. So I'd always say it's really important to have people you're accountable to while you're dating for the physical boundaries for emotional and physical. But it's important to make sure that you're not trying to make that person you're dating the person you're accountable to.
Now, time for the $1 million question. How far is too far? What do you think, Spencer?
I don't have a Bible verse for this, and so I probably shouldn't start my answer with something when I say that. But here's what I normally tell college students: that there are acts of affection, and then there are acts of desire. I think that a good rule of thumb is to ask yourself the question: is this, kiss? Is this whatever? Is this an act of affection or is this an act of desire? And I think that acts of desire are clearly meant to be experienced inside the lifelong covenant of marriage between a man and a woman. But sure, you can show affection to your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You can hug. You might can even have a kiss goodnight without it crossing the line between affection and desire. But if you're on the couch at 10 o'clock at night making out, that clearly crosses the line between affection and desire.
Yeah, I've heard it said before that in the kingdom of heaven, in God's eyes, we're brother and sister in Christ, or we're husband and wife, and there's no in between. And so to think about, okay, if that is the situation, is this something I should be engaging with my brother or sister in Christ? Or is this something where in the future I meet my current boyfriend's wife, that I could say, hey, I honored you in our dating relationship? And if it's not, it's probably not something that I should engage in.
I think, like Carrie mentioned about, accountability, it's so important to already know, like, how far is too far before you even are on that second date. I mean, it could be a first date kind of conversation or very early on. I definitely encourage, if, the girl doesn't bring it up, it should definitely be the guy's responsibility that it is addressed early and readdressed often, I think. But also like the accountability of having your DNA group or having other friends who know like what those boundaries are, and also just like what in your mind, what is too far, and like having people speak into that before you're in a situation where you're having to reevaluate. But yeah, like Spencer was saying, acts of desire for sure. Anything where it kind of is leaving you really wanting more is probably too much.
These are things to have established before you get, like you mentioned, by yourselves, with no roommates in town or whatever else. Conversations to have on the front end before you get into the situation. And I think just a word of wisdom in just realizing our highly sexualized world, you probably need to pull the boundary farther than you think. That you want your decision to be based more on Scripture than you want to be based on 20 years of romantic comedies and even pornography. So really find someone that loves Jesus more than you do. Find someone that loves the Bible more than you, and help them orient your thinking on this conversation. Last questions, we're kind of landing the plane. For those that are in a relationship, how do they figure out if the person they're in a relationship with is the one? How can you tell?
I love this question. So if you are a single man or woman and you are a Christian, there are likely thousands and thousands and thousands of other Christian men or women that you could get married to and have a wonderful, fruitful marriage with. And so in that sense of the word, there is not the one out there as if there is only one person that you could have a fruitful marriage with. Now, does God know who you're ultimately going to marry? Yes, of course. But what Charles Spurgeon said, Charles Spurgeon was a great pastor in the 19th century. He said, choose your love and then love your choice. And so basically what that means is you have the ability to choose who you want to marry. And then once you marry that person, then they do become your one. And so once you are married, is this the one? Yes, that is the one because that is the one that you chose. And so moving forward, you should act and operate out of the understanding that you have your one, your soulmate is your spouse.
Ladies, anything to add?
I think that's so good. I think the other thing to remember too is that we're all the wrong one. We're all broken. We all need a savior, and part of marriage is a part of getting to live that out, giving grace to another person. We see our sin laid out in front of us even more clearly in marriage than in a lot of situations, and so no one person is going to be able to fill this hole in you. Like ultimately, Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one that you need to fill that void in your heart and your life. And if you are not secure in your relationship with him, no man or woman is ever going to meet your expectations. So I would say understand that no one's perfect. We all have our sin issues. We all have our quirks and flaws and weirdness. And it's considering, is this someone that I could pursue Christ with? Is this someone who can make me more like the one, which is Christ? And I think that's how you kind of know.
Bring us home, Olivia.
I heard a pastor share this, just the 3 things that, how to know the person's the one. And kind of going along with what Spencer said, it's very general. There's a lot of freedom in knowing who the one is. But are they a Christian? Are you attracted to them? And do you have a good friendship? So that can, in a dating relationship, do they check all those 3 boxes? And then just the wisdom of, do people who know you and know the Bible, are they affirming that relationship? Is there affirmation? Is there, are there people speaking to that? Is this not a relationship we do not want relationships that are just, in the dark where no one else knows. So if there's affirmation from the outside and those 3 things, like there's a lot of freedom to say, yes, I think this person is the one, and I'm going to trust the Lord with it, and we're going to continue to move forward and pray about it. But yeah, I like those 3 things. I think we get those questions a lot from college students, and just like take the pressure off. It really is. There's a lot of freedom in your future spouse.
Well, there you have it. 3 easy ways to know if that person is the one. I want to thank you guys for joining us for our very first SOS Conversations, and we look forward to joining with you during our next one.